All right, let's get started. This is the section on school administration, and it's a very informal section, always meant to be that way. So participation is appreciated on all parts. A little bit about my background. My name is Steve Kieser. I went to school at Ann Arbor and studied to be a math and science teacher, secondary ed, grades 6 through 12. And after doing that for a little while, I started attending Concordia University, Chicago, and finished a master's degree in school administration. So there's my interest in school administration. And then sometime after that, went to the seminary. Was in the parish for a while then. Now I'm doing a little bit of both, mostly administration, but also as a pastor. And it's a great blessing to be able to serve. I serve currently at Faith Lutheran School in Plano, Texas, and I, like most headmasters who are pastors at least, do pastoral things, do a lot of administrative things, but I also teach in the classroom. So I'm here today mostly as a facilitator and to maybe even help address situations that you have about school administration. So to get us started, what you think about school administration today and what sorts of duties, responsibilities, activities is the school administrator busy doing? I'll start writing them down. Paperwork? Okay. You don't have a secretary, do you? Even if you have, I have 2 secretaries and I still have tons of paperwork that I'm always doing. So, budget, financial stuff. Just out of interest, how many of you charge your members tuition? Is there anyone in here who does not charge their members tuition? Faith Plano does not charge their members tuition. It's interesting, isn't it? I would actually argue that that's a fairly new phenomenon, charging members tuition. I'm not going to argue for it or against it. I'm just saying it's something that's fairly new. Maybe as a follow-up question, tuition ranges for, just generally speaking, how many of you are in the $2,000 to $3,000 range? 3 to 4? Roswell, 3 to 4? 4 to 5? 4 to 5? 5 to 6? 6 to 7? 7 to 8? Anybody over $7,000? Yep. Okay. What's $9,500? $9,500? Kindergarten? Kindergarten. Yeah, that's more than Faith Plano. We're in the almost $8,000 at Faith Plano, and we're just over $9,000 for our high school. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, let me tell you something. You can charge a lot for tuition, and those schools are not necessarily any more financially successful. So I wouldn't.
It doesn't really matter where you're at.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I think there's a lot more to the financial success, if you want to, whatever you call success. I call success not being broke at the end of the day. So, or sometimes success is not being as broke as you could have been broke. So, but yes.
In the area of financial, I'd be curious to know how many of your schools have endowments.
We do.
We're starting to.
Yeah. Just piggybacking off of this as an idea, endowments are actually, I know there are opinions about endowments, but as far as looking at the finances of your school, endowments aren't a bad idea, because when it comes to especially income, let's talk about this for a little bit, since you brought it up. When it comes to income, this is financial talk, right? It's best to diversify that income, right? So one source of financial income is going to be tuition and fees. Now, wouldn't it be great if that was like your lowest form of income and you had other forms of income? I mean, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Typically isn't the way it goes, but you have tuition and fees. What other forms of income do you have at your school? Okay, donations. And donations are really a separate, completely separate idea from fundraising.
Congregation support.
Thank you. Congregational support. Right. Another one could be an endowment, if you had one. We do. And we use the endowment to fund financial aid.
Excuse me, I'm kind of new at this game. So what's an endowment? It's invested
Well,
money?
Yeah, here's a basic idea of an endowment. An endowment is a perpetual fund. And it is usually funded by receiving donations. The donations go into the perpetual fund. And the endowment itself, the document that governs the endowment, specifies paying out. Usually it's the interest earned on the money each year.
So you need a pretty good chunk in there to really
Yes,
appreciate
yes.
interest.
Now, if you have a financial person in your church and or school, or even in your school community, it's worth talking with them about an endowment. One thing to consider, and this happened at the parish level for me, not at the school level. A quick story. As a parish pastor at Zion Lutheran Church, Zion Evangelical Lutheran Church in Storm Lake, Iowa, a rural community. And we had there a widow who had no children and no heir. Now, they lived in a very modest home, but she owned a lot of acres of land. And after her husband died, and I had done the funeral for her husband, she asked me, excuse me, she asked me about what she was going to do, because her and her husband hadn't figured out what they were going to do with any money they might have. And she wanted to give it to the church, but she didn't feel comfortable just sticking it in the church's checking account, because that would be the only way to receive the money, is to put it in a checking account. So she asked about starting an endowment at our church, and I said, you know, I'm the pastor, I'll pass this on. So I passed it on to our financial people. We had one of our finance people say, endowments would be bad for our church, and so we don't want to do that. Unfortunately, he spoke for the entire congregation. The Board of Elders talked it over and decided about a year and a half later to go ahead and establish an endowment fund, because in the farming community there are situations like this where the husband dies before, or even if you have no children, whatever. Or even if you have a lot of children, they don't need all this money. They'd rather give it to an organization. So unfortunately, by this time, this lady had already given her money to the local hospital. But what happened was the church went ahead and set up the endowment fund. Right before I left, the last funeral I had, this lady didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about it, but we had the endowment fund. Ended up leaving $800,000 to the congregation, and it went into the endowment fund. Yeah. So an endowment fund, and I mean, these were sincere Christian people whom the Lord had blessed with money. I mean, I don't understand that, but I mean, I can understand the sincere Christian part of that. I don't understand the blessed with lots of money, but it was a great burden to these individuals because they wanted to be responsible stewards of what God had given them. And if you have an endowment fund, it's a responsible way to receive a large amount of money. You may never get it. You may have an endowment that remains at zero. But if someone does choose to give you dollars, you'll have a means by which to receive that.
Now, how is that different from a foundation? Well, never mind.
Yeah. In some ways, a foundation operates in a similar way. Yeah. Schools often have endowments, but there are also foundations.
Well, you
Yeah.
can put strings on your endowment too,
You're right.
of how you're gonna run your endowment.
Right. Right. So, all right. So the goal is to diversify and to see if there are ways to increase each of these. There are more and more schools, by the way, that are trying to avoid fundraising. They're tired of nickel and diming, selling candy bars.
Well, you end up taking money from the very people that are paying your tuition and everything
Right.
else. Yeah.
Our fundraising efforts at Faith Plano. Each year we have a golf outing that raises about, I think last year it raised about 11K. Then we have the North Texas Giving Day, which is, if you're in Texas, you need to get in on this, okay? You Texans need to get in on this. All you do is you register an account with this website, and this organization helps you publicize publicize to individuals all they're asking for are donations, so it's not really even a fundraiser. So, what's that?
Like, it'd be similar to like GoFund?
Yeah, it's kind of like a GoFund.
Right.
It's a 12-hour giving event. You advertise, and it's one day of the year. It's a one-day funding event. It begins in the morning, ends in the afternoon or that evening, and people can. You don't have to sell them anything. So this may be included up here, but there may be organizations like this. Even if you put that up there and someone hears about it and they give you $100, that's $100 to help support classical Lutheran education that you didn't have. So I think we have raised, I don't even know, I'm just going to guess 10K. Okay, with that. We have a gala auction event that raises in the low 20s. I'm just going to say 21. There are other schools that raise a lot more money than that. Talk to Julia Hobrecht. They've raised quite a bit of money. There's another classical school in Houston, not Memorial, but Our Savior, that one time raised close to $100,000 in an auction gala event. So if you want to call this a fundraising event, do we have any other fundraising events? Well, our PTL, for our school budget, I guess you might call it, these are the major fundraising events. We do have other small fundraisers by PTL, things like that, but it doesn't contribute to pay for the light bills, salaries, things of that sort. These fundraisers here, you can just add them up. There's 20, 30, there's 40K. What's interesting is that this would be number one income for us. This was number two. In donations, Faith Plano was operating anywhere from around 5 to 10K for several years, if we got even that in gifts, even though we were budgeting, hoping for 25. But in the last 3 years, we have, that has jumped to nearly this amount. 125. Yeah. So when you look at that, this was 3 to 4 times this, but these switch. So this is 1, 2, 3, and we went like this. We're able to switch those around.
Donations go up.
Well, as I said last time, I think one of the we became very intentional about who we are. I don't know if that helps. Sometimes people that deal with money say that's very important. But we very intentionally started using this phrase and talking to people about this. And some of the two of these individuals right here were people who became really excited about that. And we're just extremely intentional about who we were, what we were about, not only publicly, but also exploring that and being deliberate about that. Faculty, curriculum, all our advertising, having a very unique focus. What are you about? We're about classical Lutheran education. That's what we're about. And fleshing that.
Spend a lot of money on advertising?
Yeah. I'm trying to think what our budget is. I should have brought it. We have a PR person that I think makes somewhere in the neighborhood of this, but does much more than just raise funds. No, we don't put a lot of money into advertising. The most money that we've spent on advertising would be in radio, and I've become a big fan of radio. And we've worked out a deal in our area that the radio will advertise for you at no cost, selling a discounted tuition. So it does cost us in that way. So I think the tuition is discounted 30%. Now, we don't ever get to see any of that money. But the money that the radio station makes goes toward advertising dollars. So if we have a $8,000 tuition that we sell at 70%, that's $5,600, right? So we now have $5,600 credit. Meanwhile, they did a lot of free advertising to get that person to come to our school. And so it's been a way to advertise the school, and it has been successful. It has been successful. People tell us that they've heard about us on the radio.
We're finding social media. Younger people go to Facebook, Twitter, all of those. And so we're finding social media as a real draw. We've also listed on Craigslist, iRequest people, but we haven't gotten anything out of that.
Yeah, we were talking about social media in the other session I did, and you know, you get good and bad PR from a lot of things. So, you know, the best good social media is spontaneous, unplanned social media. That's the best. When mom comes home and something really great happened, you know, she went to your Shakespeare dinner theater and she takes a picture of child and goes home and puts it on Facebook and says, what a wonderful school you have, then that's free. And I will say this, still insist upon it, the best PR doesn't cost you anything. The most effective PR costs you $0. So I've always been one that believes in spending little in PR. Rather, I would work on what we're about and getting your community, the people who are already invested in your school, to talk about it. It's free, and it works a whole lot better than a paid advertisement on social media or even on the radio. Yes?
I was just thinking with your donations, are those people who approached you, or did you consider people in your school and church community and go to them? And then are you the only person who goes to those people? Do you have?
So far, these have been all unsolicited. They've been all unsolicited. Now, is there a place for, you know, purposeful solicitation? Yeah, I think that that can be an avenue to take. I have been, because I'm also a pastor, you know, sometimes the pastor going out and asking for money. What I can do, though, is tell other people that I can tell other people what's going on. And someone else may say, wow, I didn't know that you could do that. I didn't know people were doing that. Can we do that too? What do we need to do? And I think that goes in making the case for your school. One of the things that I talk to our families about, our church about, our school about, is that the state of Lutheran education, LCMS education, is in decline. It used to be, even just 15 years ago, that the motto was, if your school isn't growing, it's dying. I don't know if I believe that or not, but that was certainly what people thought. So that success was measured by a growing school, an increase in enrollment each year. If the trend is that schools are closing and overall student population is declining, then if you want to use this success, worldly point of view, having even a flat enrollment is a good thing. Because on average, Missouri Synod schools, whether classical or not, are in decline. So a flat enrollment is, a sustaining enrollment is actually a good thing. And I've heard of schools in our circles that are actually increasing in numbers. So those are good, that's good news. And classical Lutheran schools are opening. Some of them are opening and failing. Some of them are opening, more of them are opening and succeeding. One of the things I think is important to that success is paying attention to the temporal issues, the administrative and other issues in the school. I think many people that open up schools, I think they have great theology. I think they have a decent understanding of classical education. And yet sometimes, oftentimes, I would almost argue every time, what they don't have is they don't have the nuts and bolts, the temporal, earthly issues taken care of. Understanding issues of administration, the business sense. We get confused about we say, well, we can't run the school like a business because it's a church school. But that isn't true, because we live in the world and our schools are subject to the elements of a business. They simply are.
I always argue just that argument. If you don't run your school like a business, it will fail. I have a business in town, and so you have to run it somewhat.
There are definitely business elements.
There's business elements to it.
It's
and
probably not cut and dry
Right.
exactly like running JCPenney or something like
But-
that.
but
But
that's
there
why
are
I think
certainly
they
worldly
fail.
elements that are there that have to be paid attention to,
That's right.
most certainly. Yeah.
I have two questions. Your donations, were they from members or non-members?
All of our donations are from members, and they currently do not have children in our school.
Okay. The radio spots, what do you list them under? Your sports, do they come on during the sports events? Where your hot.
Wherever they want to put them.
So you don't have a specific.
They're not categorized.
Okay. I only ask that because we have a business and we love doing the radio in our town.
Yeah, they also usually give you a web spot on there, but
Okay.
a lot more traction from the actual verbal 30-second spots, 60-second spots. Yeah. Okay, you want to do any more about finance? Done with finances?
Did you put your donations in the general budget, or did you put it in the endowment?
No, because endowments are direct gifts to the endowment.
To the endowment?
Yeah.
You can't put any, just an extra gift in?
We probably could, but we don't have a need to right now. So these go for other things. This amount goes for other things. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on income? I think there's a whole lot more we can do with donations and understanding why people give and not being afraid to receive donations. giving people opportunity to make donations. I don't think there's necessarily, I understand that sometimes people that go out and are always asking for a donation sound, I mean, you know what they sound like, and you know what you feel like when people are always hitting you up for money. So we're not asking people to go broke, but we are saying that people who have gifts to give, that we ought not hinder them either if they want to support the school. We ought not hinder them either. So if I could get rid of fundraising, I'd do it right away. I've asked our school board if we'd consider just see what would happen if we just didn't have any fundraising. Yeah. There are schools that are doing this, by the way. There's schools that are getting rid of all. To me, I would rather do this than to sell them popcorn, candy bars, things that are not good for them. It's not good for their health, right? They're things that they're probably going to throw away or get broken. Yeah, I mean, that's useful, right? I mean, people are going to...
But there again, it takes a certain couple of people to run that whole
Right.
thing and do it.
Right. Yeah, script, I think script is, can be very helpful. You're going to spend that money anyway. You're going to shop at Walmart.
Right.
So you do it with a gift card that you buy through the school.
Well, I was one that did dining in and pizza things. So Papa John's would sponsor a
Right.
Tuesday.
Right.
You go to Papa John's, you got to eat dinner anyway.
Right.
Red Robin, you can set up a thing with dance.
No, this one was just you go and tell them I'm with Emmanuel Lutheran, and then they keep the receipts. So this wasn't us working. We and depending on the business in your area, the head elder at Roswell said Subway would gladly do it. He owned Subways in town. We did Applebee's and we did a pancake breakfast.
Yeah,
that we
Applebee's.
worked.
Okay.
Buffalo Wild Wings.
And those are, and that made, it was $3,000, but we didn't, our fundraising at Emmanuel was never for the budget. Fundraising was only for additional things.
Yeah. Now, let me back off of this a little bit. Some of this went toward the budget and some didn't, now that I want to be careful. We had always put in our work, we call it a work program at Faith Plano. We'd always put $25K in. We never got it until maybe 2 or 3 years ago we did. And so of this amount right here, I think next year we've upped that to somewhere in this amount in the work program. In the work program. We have a habit tuition goes up about 5% every year. Now remember, these are for community members only at Faith Plano. If you're a member of the congregation, you do not pay.
Oh, you do not pay?
Yeah, and right now, we are somewhere in the vicinity of about 70% LCMS. So only about 30% of our tuition is from what we call community.
Most of us are just the opposite.
Ours is just the opposite. It used to be 20 years ago, it was just the opposite. Now it's
Yeah.
Like 20 or 30%.
Right. Right. So, excuse me, yeah, everyone's got a little different makeup. But only 30% of our student body, even though that's true, this item right here, our donations are all from LCMS, congregational support, which are additional dollars than these. This still ends up being a smaller amount when you include this, and I would even say this, most of our fundraising comes from our own members. So the majority of this is LCMS Faith Plano members. Yeah, the majority. I think that's true because if I'm paying $8,000 a year, I don't feel like making another donation, right? But the LCMS members have an opportunity to contribute here if they wish.
And when you do your fundraising, don't you feel like you're trying to reach out to the whole community? That's what we're trying to do, but I feel like it ends up, it's just all your own school and congregation that's doing the supporting of the fundraising of the event. and you know, you're always hoping you have an auction that you're gonna reach out there, but I don't know how you get them to come out of your community.
Yeah.
At Roswell, they purposefully only really advertised in the community for the Gatsby dinner. They did three years in a row.
Uh-huh.
They knew the price point wasn't going to be friendly to school people and church
Right.
people,
Right.
but plenty of community people came, and they made over 10 grand. It was $80 a ticket, and it was, dress up like the 20s, that kind of stuff, and lots of people from the community who none of us had ever seen, really, showed up to these events.
Well, and having said that, like you said, the Catholics here do it really well because they have something very similar like that, and their tickets are very expensive, but they have some high-powered speaker that comes in. That's very well known throughout everywhere, and they bring them in, and that's what their tickets are, and they do really well.
Let's move on to another topic. Sometimes when us administrators start talking about money, we keep talking forever, and that. What's everybody doing? For lack of a better term, in servicing. What's your plan for the faculty, or what has been your plan in the past? Your practice? How do you keep your faculty abreast? What sorts of things do you do?
Something that we did, which linked up with CCLE teacher certification, was that I have, and this, it depends on where you are, but in southeastern New Mexico, we had a really solid circuit. And so for Teacher in Service Day, which was President's Day, I had my circuit pastors each present a topic for about an hour. That matched 5 of the things you're supposed to write a 1-2-page essay for the certification. So principles of biblical interpretation, Christus centricity of the scriptures, anything like that. And the pastors loved it because they don't get to do that kind of stuff. The pastor who's your headmaster, you're tired of listening to him. So you get to listen to other people. We did lunch, we did matins, it was a great day, it was rejuvenating instead of...
So it was a one-day event. You use local pastors as presenters. Okay. What else what are other people doing? Does anybody have anything that they do each month or each week or something like that?
So when I was at the school where we're at now, we had, our administrator would pick a book, and we would go through that book
Yeah.
and talk about it.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's what we do at Faith Plano. We usually pick, I think next year we're going to do bondage of the will. And we'll work through that.
Start with part 6.
We'll work through that. Usually once or twice a month. But we have weekly meetings that last 45 minutes. So these are very condensed opportunities, and we have other business. Some advice regarding meetings. I don't like meetings. I can't stand meetings, and it's the life of a pastor, school administrator. You know that. So I always start meetings on time, and I always end on time. Always. Well, I say always, but always. And Board of Christian Education meetings, say I'm walking out, we're done at 9 o'clock. If we start at 7, we're done at 9. So that's kind of if we're not done, I guess we'll have to meet some other time, or we'll have to call each other or email each other. But what often happens is someone goes and starts talking for a really long time, and everyone has to sit and listen to them. Meanwhile, your families are back home. They're eating up all of your precious time that's worth a lot. So set time limits to your meetings. If you're in charge of the meeting, you can do that very easily. You just say, we're done.
In the agenda, too. I mean, set the expectation along the side of the agenda. That at 3:30 to 3:40, we're reviewing the agenda.
Right. So if you don't get through everything that you plan to get through with the bondage of the will, you just stop. Okay? You don't have to keep going because you didn't get as far as you wanted to, or whatever your topic is. We also usually have a theological emphasis, and then we also we have another topic. And sometimes what we've done is we've built those topics off of CCLE conferences. So last year it was what is the good? So we did a lot on classroom management, instruction, even things on how to dress appropriately. Beauty, when we had beauty, we did beauty in the classroom was one of our, and we spent several sections on that. So a lot of that was generated by me, and I did the presentation. I also like to include other faculty. For instance, we have a faculty member who's taking master's coursework at University of Dallas in classical education, and she is learning all kinds of wonderful things. And so I'm tapping her and saying, hey, we're going to put you on the agenda, and you're going to come back and share with us what you've learned. Or if someone goes to we did one of the professional development activities I thought was great and low cost is to send them to observe someone else in classical school, especially if you have a classical school that is near you. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, it would be best, of course, if it was another classical Lutheran school. We don't have, well, we have Keller that's very close to us. We could do that. But we also have classical charter schools in our area. We also have other classical Christian schools that are involved with either the SCL, Society for Classical Learning, or the ACCS, Association of Classical Christian Schools. And send my teachers over there, and I mean, the teachers know when they hear things that are false doctrine and things like that. They come back and talk about that. They talk about things they really like, and they talk about things that they really didn't like. But it cost me a sub pay, which is at our school $80. You get $80 to sub for a day, and usually we pay their mileage to get 15 miles down the road and back. And then when they come back, guess what they have to do? They have to make a presentation at that faculty meeting. So really, really good way to watch another teacher, get another idea, and even if they don't like what the teacher is doing, they now know what they don't want to do, which also is very valuable. So big fan of observation. Another idea for professional development, which we used to do in Texas, and we're talking about doing this again, is to have fellow classical Lutheran schools get together for a day or for a small mini CCLE, something like that. We used to have what was called the North Texas Classical Educators Conference. And years ago, the very first one we ever had, I remember Joel Brandes came. And Joel presented to the faculty. And we had Our Savior came one time. We had Memorial come one time. And so there were others that would come. And even parents came. Parents came to that. So to do a small conference locally, that way you all share the cost. You can't afford to bring down a speaker for only your group. And sometimes you can bring in speakers from your faculties, so each of your faculties can be presenters. You have a faculty that's really good at science, a faculty member that's really good with history, someone really good at teaching Latin. We've had speakers like Dr. Nordling came and talked to us about why we ought to teach Latin. One year we had the Garwoods come. Betty and Ron Garwood came. Now that's been quite a few years ago. I don't know if they're still doing speaking engagements or not, but the Garwoods came. So you can bring in, and what I would do is I'd go to CCLE conferences. I'd go to different speakers. I'd find ones that I liked, and I'd say, hey, would you come down to Texas in January? That's when we'd have it. We'd have it on President's Day. So there's a lot of different ideas, but one thing I would encourage you is if you do a one-time event, that's fine, but I would encourage you to have a book to read throughout the year. Do at least one book read. And then the other thing is, while your faculty may be and hopefully are involved in your congregation, they're going to Bible study, they're showing up at the divine service. Still, as faculty members, they ought to be reading through the confessions. They ought to be reading other theological works, bondage of the will. There's other things too. So that is good to have with your pastor. And it's a great way if you're not the pastor. I see at least 2 pastors in this room, so I'm assuming the rest of you have a relationship with your pastor who comes in and helps you with the school and is a part of the school, or maybe he is the headmaster. I don't know what your situations are, but one of the things that happened with the progressive education in Missouri Synod schools is that we pushed the pastor out the door. And we said, we don't want the pastor involved with schools because the pastor doesn't know anything about schools. All he knows about is preaching and Bible study and, those kinds of things. That doesn't have anything to do with the school, they said. And they divided, and in dividing, they were both conquered. So we do not exclude your pastor. He needs to be a very important part of your school. Okay, he's not only doing chapels, but with the staff as well. He needs to be the catechist for your staff. The catechist. Yeah. So invite him to set up a study of the Augsburg Confession, something like that, with your faculty. Okay, so involve him. Any other professional development things that anyone's doing? Yes.
Well, just with your idea of going to observe another classical school, this past year, we just arranged for our teachers to observe each other, and they loved that. They thought
Thank
it
you.
was a
Yeah.
really good idea.
It's a great idea. Absolutely.
Teachers and observing.
Yes.
Not
If you have new staff, by the way, anybody have a new staff member coming on board? Pair them with a good teacher. Of course, you're going to want to be involved. This doesn't mean that you don't have any responsibility for that new teacher now, but you're not available a lot. You know that. And so this person has another teacher, and you assign them. And you talk to both of them and you say, okay, you're going to work together this year, all right? And even give them things to do. Work together, okay? So I have new teachers also, one new teacher, and we are pairing her with a great complementary teacher that's teaching the grade right above her, which is really nice too, because those kids she is educating will be her students next year, and so she kind of knows where she wants them to be by the end of that year. But there's a lot of things with classroom management, discipline, blah, 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 that school policies that, a veteran teacher knows, doesn't have to go look it up in the handbook, can just quick reference the teacher next door, or said parent is upset about something, and, always have a wise advice on how to respond.
When you send a new teacher out to observe, it's more beneficial if you have somebody with them to point out all the things they're doing. Because sometimes they just see this nice, wonderful classroom and they don't quite get, oh yeah, I should be trying this, or I should be trying that, or this is why this is working.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's hard to do unless
Yeah.
you're the person going with them.
Most first-year teachers, my experience has been that even if they have that wonderful, perfect vision, reality sets in by the first couple weeks, okay?
Yep.
Because
And you
Johnny
always wanna
behaved
wait a
himself
couple
for the
weeks
first half
before
the day
you
or the first
send it out.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, if they don't believe you, just give them a little time. Reality will set in, and they'll realize why they've been partnered with someone else. It happens to all of us. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Where do administrators find their teachers? We're gonna need somebody next year. Actually, I'd like to replace myself as administrator. I'm just trying to go, kind of fill in the blank this year,
Yep.
kind of thing.
Well, let's ask. Where do you find your teachers, everyone?
Under rocks.
Okay. You can go to certain colleges. I know.
Are Concordias? No, right?
Well,
Are we gonna?
not necessarily, but Hillsdale was pointed out. I know this past year, Angie Hill and I were both at Hillsdale. I think I'm going to make it a practice to go almost every year to Hillsdale, just because I may meet a sophomore who will be graduating when I actually need a teacher, and when they get to know you and they see your face and you take a picture with them, and that's kind of what we've done, and we work together. And we also had Redeemer was also there, weren't they? Yeah, Redeemer was there. So there were 3 of Missouri Synod schools there. But it's kind of nice to work together. Sometimes we're looking for the same teacher. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we may think that we're interested in the same person, and but it is a great time to work together and Hillsdale has a job fair, so it's a great place to go get new teachers. I would recommend this. If you need a new teacher, always fill out the new graduate request form from Synod. Now, I have a reason for suggesting that you do that. I think Synod needs to know that we need classical educators. So even if they can't send us anyone, they're getting these requests from us.
Right.
Everybody needs to do that. We need to fill their inboxes with requests for classical educators so that they get it, okay? So even though they may not send you anyone. This past year, the last 2 years, I have requested teachers through the Concordia University system. Through the placement directors, I've received 0. Even while I've received 3 teachers from Concordias. Now, what does that tell you? Classical educators are still finding an alternate route to actually getting into the classroom.
The placement people won't send you anybody.
Well, one of the reasons that this happened is that placement directors, up until hopefully now, things are hopefully changing in Synod, but placement directors up until now only place who? State certified teachers. Okay? How many state certified teachers are there that are coming out of our Concordias that know anything about classical Lutheran education? Very few, if any of them. They don't talk about it at all. Yeah. So I think that's why. Nevertheless, we're getting teachers placed, and I announced the other day, I think it was yesterday, we have a student who had gone through the coursework that qualifies an individual for synodical placement, a teacher call in the LCMS, who also was a history major. She was ahead of her game. I don't know how she knew that or how she did that.
I thought she took just the religious classes that are.
No, she finished what
She
Concordia.
took the education courses?
At Concordia Irvine, they have what's called the Christ College. And the Christ College is 18 credit hours, something like that. It includes classes like teaching the Christian faith. She had to do some observation. She didn't have to do student teaching, but she did have to take some teaching classes. Now, I don't know what quality those were or anything like that, but that was involved in Christ College Irvine's Lutheran teacher diploma. And so, yes, she did complete all that coursework, and she had a history major. So we originally contracted her, and when we found out that she was eligible for a teacher call, because she'd completed that coursework, we called Concordia Irvine. We said, hey, this teacher completed all of this coursework. Isn't she eligible for a teacher call? Well, she hasn't completed the teacher ed program, but let me ask. It wasn't too much, I don't know how much time. I think it was the same day, maybe it was the next day, or maybe it was a week, I don't remember now. Yes, send the paperwork through, it'll go to the DP, and she will be she'll be on the roster. So I know at Concordia Irvine, and I think she's made history, because I don't know anybody that's done that. And it's funny that, I shouldn't say it's funny, but it's interesting that she made history, because if you talk to Terry Schmidt at the national office, he'll tell you Synod has never ever said that teachers require teacher certification to receive a teacher call. That's never ever been a part of Synods. The reason is faculties determine who is eligible for a call, and faculties have generally only approved, have approved only those that have completed the state certification program. So Concordia University Irvine, hey, my hat tips to them for being willing to do that, but also to our Board of Christian Education at Faith Plano for being willing to give it a try. So that is, I want to make, before I go on, to make sure that, so yes, you may go through the CUS. I don't think you may not actually get anyone. The other, you can go to Hillsdale. Stay in touch, get to know some of the various personalities here. Make sure you shake Dr. Manouja's hand, okay? Shake Dr. Manouja's hand, introduce yourself to him, give your card to him, say something memorable to him, okay? That's good memorable, okay? The same for Tom Korchak. The same for Tom Korchak. These are your links at Concordia University Irvine. It's primarily going to be C.J. Armstrong, but also Scott Ashman, but C.J. works most closely with the students. And by the way, who will be looking for a possible teacher next year? Any one of us could be, right? Did you know that there's a CUI student here? Her name is Megan. I forget her last name. I said, she's a friend of my teacher and she's here. Why did she come? Because she's hoping to get a job in a year at the end of this school. She has the last year. I should have introduced her.
There's a
Yeah.
Concordia Mequon student here too.
Okay, is there?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. There's actually several. But I think one of them is from Faith Plano, and he's going to be a pastor. Stephen?
Okay, yeah.
But also Pastor Nuss's daughter is a CUW student. Yeah. So they're starting to come to CCLE conferences. Another reason to come to CCLE. And we've talked about actually encouraging this among Synod, that profs would encourage their students, their young men and women to attend the CCLE conference. That's exactly how I found Aubrey Bogle. I met her a year ago. And she also came to Lutheranism in the Classics. She was at both conferences. I met her twice. Her face and her name stuck in my mind. And I reached out to her rather than her reaching out to us. It doesn't always happen, does it? At Hillsdale, though, you'll be surprised, and Mrs. Hill can vouch for this. These young men and women are getting multiple offers across the United States. If a Lutheran won't work for you, they're going to go work for a charter school, most likely a charter school, or they'll go work for one of the reform schools. They will find employment, and they will have many, many offers. Some of them getting 10 to a dozen offers, verbal offers, while there. It's a competitive market. So just be aware of that. Be aware of that.
And start looking in January or December.
Some administrators look year at a
Yeah.
time.
It's frustrating because the church board doesn't do their budget till July.
Right. Right. Why do they do that to us? I don't know. See all this gray right here?
Because at some point, a previous administrator was probably irritated that it was done in December, and they didn't have the money to hire someone in July.
Yeah. So we hire them and say, well, we already spent the money, better go find it. So those are some ideas on how to, post your announcement on ccle.org. Post your announcement on ccle.org, including the need for the need for administrators.
You know, our
Well,
Be full-time regardless.
well, I think we're out of time. If you wish to contact me, my email address is skieser@flsplano.org, or you can call me on, actually text me on the cell phone, because I probably won't answer if you just call me. But my cell phone number is 972-210-1160. Text. There's no way you can leave a voicemail for me. I do not have my phone set up for voicemail, but you can text me. Thank you, everybody.